Okay, so think about this. How does a huge, massive blockbuster movie, the kind with space battles and superheroes, manage to dig into something really deep and human, like trauma?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? These really personal, sometimes shattered experiences that make us who we are.
Exactly. And for this deep dive, we're going to unpack exactly that the way memory and trauma weave together, looking at it through a media studies lens, specifically using the 2019 film Captain Marvel.
Right. Our mission, basically, is to explore how Captain Marvel handles things like dissociative amnesia and the whole difficult journey of trauma recovery.
And the techniques it uses.
Absolutely. We'll look at the sophisticated film techniques it uses to show these, internal struggles, and also, importantly, how audiences actually reacted to that portrayal.
Hmm.
And what's cool is that these insights, they're pulled straight from detailed analysis of the movie itself. It really shows how these big popcorn flicks can carry, well, a lot more weight than just explosions.
Totally. So, at the absolute center of this is Carol Danvers, or Vers, as she's called for a lot of the film.
Right.
Her story isn't just your standard hero gets powers origin. It's really this profound, sometimes confusing exploration of some pretty heavy psychological stuff.
Hmm.
She's a character built to make you feel her struggle, you
Yeah,
know?
and the film throws us right into that struggle, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's actually a pretty insightful look at trauma, specifically the psychological thing called dissociative amnesia.
Which isn't just forgetting where you put your keys.
No, no, not at all. This is severe memory loss, and it's directly tied to traumatic events. You see it in
Hmm.
Carol's nightmares, these weird dreams she can't explain, and those flashes of memory.
The fragments.
Exactly, the fragments that hint at this whole past she's forgotten, a painful one. And what's really smart, thinking about it from that media studies angle, is how the movie's structure, its actual narrative, tries to copy that fragmentation.
So you feel it too.
Precisely. You, the listener, you're sort of meant to feel that confusion, that disorientation right there with her. It puts you right inside that traumatized headspace.
That's such a strong way to do it, forcing you into her reality. So how does the film actually, kick off this journey for her to get those memories back and sort of figure out who she is?
Well, we meet Vers as this Kree Star Force member, right?
Yeah.
And she's constantly dealing with these hazy nightmares.
Right.
But things really heat up when she gets ambushed by the Skrulls, captured, and then bam, crash lands on Earth. And that's where she runs into Nick Fury.
And that crash isn't just like an action beat.
No, it's the trigger. It's the inciting incident that launches her whole intense and often really painful journey to figure herself out.
Okay, so this journey then becomes about empowerment through trauma. Is that fair?
I think that's a great way to put it. Can trauma actually lead to empowerment? The film seems to say yes. Carol's path involves facing these past traumas head on. Things like loss in her past, hints of family stuff, and definitely emotional manipulation from Yanrog.
Yeah, the gaslighting element.
Exactly. It's
Right.
almost textbook.
Hmm.
And the film weaves that into how she develops as a character.
Yeah.
It shows how trauma doesn't just shape you, but also your ability to act, your agency.
Hmm. Hmm.
And ultimately, her real power comes out not when she forgets the past, but when she confronts it, accepts it. She reclaims her strength through, well, resilience and finally accepting herself.
And to make us feel that internal struggle, they use that narrative trick you mentioned, unreliable narration.
Right. It's key.
Because her memories, they aren't shown like clear video playbacks. They're messy, they're subjective, just these blurry flashes sometimes.
Yeah.
Which isn't just style, is it? It really hammers home her psychological state and helps us get the depth of her trauma. As you're watching, you're kind of actively trying to piece it together with her.
Which mirrors how complex processing trauma is in real life.
Yeah.
It's a really immersive way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you look at her character arc through that lens, you see this huge transformation from soldier to hero, you could say.
Right, from being controlled.
Exactly. She starts under that really oppressive Kree training, taught to suppress emotions, basically hide her true power. But then you get these pivotal moments, like when she finally confronts Yanrog, or when she just unleashes those amazing photon blasts.
Which is cool effects.
Not at all. They signify this deep internal shift.
Hmm.
By the end, she totally breaks free from the Kree control. It's a massive change in her identity and her power.
And a huge part of that is her embracing identity, right? Those memory fragments, they're not just random. They're the breadcrumbs leading back to her life on Earth.
The crucial links.
And remembering the tough stuff, like the loss of her friend, Wendy Lawson, that wasn't just backstory filler. It adds so much depth to her character and really highlights that central theme, memory linked to trauma.
Hmm.
And it's her acceptance of all of it, her whole history, her true self. That's when all the pieces click and she really becomes Captain Marvel authentically.
And, it's not all doom and gloom and intense introspection.
No, there's some fun stuff too.
There is. The film balances it really well with humor and emotion,
Mm.
especially in her interactions with Talos and Fury. Like that banter about Talos turning into a cat.
Yeah, classic.
It's funny, but in a film dealing with these heavy themes, those moments of lightness are actually really important. They show resilience, right? Humor as a coping mechanism. It makes this incredibly powerful character feel relatable,
So
human.
she's not just a weapon.
Exactly. She ends up being this true symbol of empowerment. Yeah, a formidable warrior, but also a leader who's navigating some really complex emotional stuff with strength, vulnerability, and, yeah, even some wit.
Okay, so we've sort of unpacked the what and the why of her journey. Now let's get into the craft. How does Captain Marvel, as a movie, actually show us all this internal stuff instead of just telling us? From that media studies view, this is where it gets really interesting.
Oh, yeah. It's especially noticeable in how they use visual memory and montage. These aren't just your standard flashbacks.
Right, they feel different.
They're really artfully put together sequences. They're meant to visually show you Carol's fragmented memories, her experiences. They often look like these brief, almost dreamlike flashes, mixing images from her past with what's happening now.
It pulls you in.
It really does. It engages your senses, invites you to sort of experience that fragmentation with her. It helps you get a much deeper, more empathetic feel for the psychological impact of everything she's been through.
And connected to that, there's the narrative memory and emotional resonance. How does that work?
Well, from a media studies perspective, narrative memory serves this kind of social function. It's about taking traumatic experiences and reshaping them into stories that other people can share and understand. It builds empathy.
So the story changes depending on her present.
Kind of, yeah. The narrative adapts to her current situation, which lets the audience connect emotionally. And by leaning into her unreliable memories, like we talked about, the film makes you feel the trauma rather than just giving you a straight timeline. It really bridges that gap between a very personal, internal thing and a collective understanding of what trauma can feel like.
That makes sense. What about the places, the settings?
Oh, the symbolic use of setting is another really clever technique. Think about the contrast between, say, the dark, sort of confusing Kree spaces and then the often bright, wide-open landscapes on Earth.
Like the desert sequence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The desert, which often symbolizes clarity or finding yourself, maybe a spiritual journey that becomes a really key space for her development. That contrast helps underline her journey from confusion to empowerment. It's almost like the setting itself helps her transition, connecting her broken pieces to her past while she grows into Captain Marvel.
And you can't forget the sound, right? The auditory elements.
Absolutely vital. Music and sound design are doing heavy lifting here. They use sound to trigger memories and emotions in Carol.
Like how things work in real life for trauma survivors.
Precisely. Certain sounds or music can bring back intrusive memories. It's not just background noise in the film, it's actively working with the visuals to show the trauma, but also, importantly, to suggest ways healing can happen, like a specific song or sound effect jarring a memory loose.
Okay, so they used all these cool techniques, but how did it land? What was the reception like?
Well, it's interesting because the reviews on how it portrayed trauma and memory were a bit mixed.
Oh.
Yeah, some critics felt that while the film was clearly trying to show Carol's emotional depth, it maybe didn't always quite get there. They argued sometimes it relied a bit too much on exposition.
People explaining things.
Right, characters explaining her feelings rather than letting the cinematic language fully embody her experience.
That's fair. Although I remember reading that despite that, reviewers often pointed to those surreal sequences of her faded memories as being some of the best parts.
That's true, too. Even if some critics wanted the film to lean even harder into that fragmented style, maybe get even weirder with it.
Embrace the weirdness.
Yeah. Those memory moments really did stand out as strong points.
Mm.
And it's also worth mentioning her whole character arc, her evolution, it kind of reflected some broader challenges that female superheroes often face in the comics themselves. And that also got mixed reactions, about how complex or consistent her development felt.
Right, adapting established characters always brings up debate.
It does. It raised interesting questions about how we engage with and critique character development in these huge cinematic universes, especially when they're trying to break new psychological ground.
But even with those critiques, it seems like the core emotional stuff, the consequences of her trauma, really hit home for audiences.
Absolutely. The film tapped into those fundamental themes of fear, anxiety, the search for safety,
Yeah.
things that are central to trauma theory. And that created a really meaningful connection between viewers and Carol's struggles.
Yeah.
It felt universal in a way.
Okay, so we've really dug into Captain Marvel's approach to memory and trauma. What's the big takeaway here? What does this mean for you listening right now?
Well, zooming out a bit, I think it really shows how popular media, even these massive superhero movies, can be, well, surprisingly powerful tools.
For exploring complex psychology.
Exactly. Things like dissociative amnesia, trauma recovery, resilience. By looking closely at the film techniques, we can really appreciate the subtle, sometimes sophisticated ways filmmakers can communicate these deep internal human experiences. It kind of subverts expectations of what a blockbuster can do.
Yeah, definitely. So we've seen how Captain Marvel used its story and its cinematic tools, the visuals, the sound, the narrative structure to explore these really profound themes of memory and trauma, and how its reception, while maybe not universally perfect, was still pretty impactful in getting people talking about these heavy topics.
Right. And maybe that leaves us with a final thought to chew on for you listening.
Mhm.
If film can use things like visual montage, narrative memory, and sound design to get at the complexities of trauma,
Mm.
what about other media?
Oh, interesting.
Think about, say, interactive digital experiences or maybe immersive video games. How might they engage with and represent memory and trauma in totally unique ways? What new kinds of insights could those forms offer us?